Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. Founders, entrepreneurs, and individual professionals, we all need to keep track of ideas that are helping create our today and tomorrow. Bits About Books will strive to find those books and speak to their authors, go behind the scenes and understand what inspired the authors to write the books that they did and how they went about doing so. Through our conversations, we hope to gain insights that will help us to get the most out of our efforts. I'm your host Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of Pitchlink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform where our mission is to make buying easy. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. It means a lot to hear from you. Today, we have with us Tyler Menke, and we shall speak with him about his latest book, The Pirate's Guide to Sales.
I always think it's funny what stats do. Stats can mean one thing on the surface and something entirely different once you dig into it. So one thing that I've seen thrown around a lot is that 60% of salespeople fail to meet their quota. Well, if you think about it and you do the math, everybody's going after the same pool of customers. And let's say you always have 3 other people vying for the same bid and to acquire the same new customer. 2 out of the 3 are going to lose every time. And it's likely the same guy, more frequently than not, that actually wins the sale. And that's the guy who does all the legwork. So I think everything's changing exponentially faster. And then in addition, everything's getting bigger, which means we need to be much more focused in our targeting patterns and trying to find customers, not only that we're certain or believe that we can bring value to, but they're actually willing to receive value or make some sort of change.
Tyler, to say the least, is unlike any guest I had on the show. For starters, he grew up on a farm. His mother's side of the family was blue-collar, and father's side all doctors, surgeons, and nurses. The 2 family structures were very different, but both had tremendous influence on him, Tyler told me. Hard work, persistence, and creativity were on display and a big part of his childhood. He spent most of his life coping with undiagnosed learning disabilities. School was always a challenge. Today, however, Tyler is a top-performing sales guy in the medical field. The Pirate's Guide is his attempt to share with others a how-to guide based on real-world selling experiences and research. It's a collection of interviews, insights, and observations from the sellers in the field and some of the brightest business minds in the world. The first half of the book, Voyage Prep, is how to get your selling brand established, prepare, plan, prospect, and target. The second half, the 6 points of sale, is on the sales cycle itself from opening to closing and all points in between. The book then ends with a sustaining and growing through KPI and measurement, along with a call to action theme in the burning of the boats. So let's dive right into this wonderfully entertaining and learning voyage with Tyler Menke. Tyler, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm excited to speak to you about your new book, and what a name, Pirate's Guide to Sales. How did you get there?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. It's been great. It's been a pleasure, really, through writing a book in this process, getting to meet all the different people that I have. So I very much appreciate you having me on. As it relates to the title, it was one of those things where for a while I had been writing and sort of mulling around with the idea of a book, but you need sort of something different and catchy. And I was driving along the highway and I heard a Steve Jobs quote that struck a nerve with me. And the quote was, it's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy. More fun to be a pirate than join the Navy. And so in essence, Jobs was big on the belief that there really, at this point in time, isn't a whole lot of truly new ideas. But there are people that are hyper specialized and have very finely tuned a plan around how they do things. So he implored his people to go out and find that person and take the ideas and concepts that they learned from that person and make it and apply it into their own system. So that's sort of what I thought sales needed, having been in sales for a long period of time. I was kind of tired of all the method-based sales stuff. And so I thought with the exponential change that happens in business, if we could have a place for people to go where they could get the best ideas that they could then pirate for their own system, that would be something of value to people.
Interesting. So I'm tempted to go in two directions right now. One is ask you about why you thought you should write a book, because one thing there is no lack of is a sales book.
So if you're going to write something or create anything, really, I've always been entrepreneurial in spirit. But if you're going to create something, there has to be a need for it. And oftentimes I found if I can't find anything, then let's create it. So that's sort of where the concept was born. There's no shortage of sales books, but if you look at the titles and the authors, what you find is that there's one of two things when it comes to sales books. They're either entirely research based. So there's concepts like spin selling and challenger sales that I've had extensive training on throughout the years. Those are both very much helpful in some regard, but they are written by entirely research-based people that have not ever been in B2B sales, and it changes. And so that brings up the other problem. If you're trying to do something method-based, people do not like to be sold. I always hated being sold. And so so much so that I never even really wanted to be in sales until later. So for me, I think the thing that made this needed was that everything out there was either method-based or written by somebody who's never actually sold in B2B. So I wanted to have something that would be unique.
Now, tell me about how you see the selling process itself changing, morphing. How do you see the relationships changing? How do you see the transactional process changing? What are the changes that you see?
So I think there's two things that are happening, and they both lend themselves to some sort of quick way to take and insert value in as many ways possible. The first thing happening is that everything is getting bigger. Companies are getting bigger and they're joining forces. I come from I've been in medical sales for over a decade, and that's a good example of that happening, where you've got hospital systems buying up physician practices, and then you even have hospitals buying up and gobbling up smaller community hospitals. Is happening in consumer products and almost everywhere in B2B. You have a larger customer, which means there's more people selling to that larger customer. So I always think it's funny what stats do. Stats can mean one thing on the surface and something entirely different once you dig into it. So one thing that I've seen thrown around a lot is that 60% of salespeople fail to meet their quota. Well, if you think about it and you do the math, everybody's going after the same pool of customers. And let's say you always have 3 other people vying for the same bid and to acquire the same new customer. 2 out of the 3 are going to lose every time. And it's likely the same guy more frequently than not that actually wins the sale. And that's the guy who does all the legwork. So I think everything's changing exponentially faster. And then in addition, everything's getting bigger, which means we need to be much more focused in our targeting patterns and trying to find customers not only that we're certain or believe that we can bring value to, but they're actually willing to receive value or make some sort of change. So that's sort of how I've seen things. You have to be much more hyper focused, much more hyper specialized, and find innovative and different ways to bring value.
Very interesting. Once you decided to write this book, how did you sort of plan it to be different? How did you think you will make it more relevant than the ones that you thought were not universally relevant?
I would like to think that you could have different specialized target audiences. So you could say, I want to target medical sales, or I want to target maybe a bigger pull in B2B sales. That's one thing that's going through your thought process. The other is, do you want to get targeted in your conceptual approach? So do you want to have a book on closing? Do you want to have a book on, targeting, prospecting? You see all those out there. The thing that I kept coming back to is typically the hardest thing to do is to take something that is fairly complex and has a lot to it and boil it down to something that is simple and memorable. That's where I think, the best books, survive the test of time. You look at books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's still relevant today, even though it's so old. And it's relevant across different types of sales cycles, different types of B2B selling to, individuals. It's helpful just outside of sales and business and life in general. And so I wanted something like that. So that was one thing that came into mind as a goal. The second was, I am a huge reader. I probably read 2 books a week. And for me, the best books, the books that I have, the books and authors that I have fallen in love with over the years, they really have 2 things going for them. One is that they tell a story to make the concept memorable. So, stories are something that we tend to remember and repeat. And so if you can have a great anecdotal story that ties to a complex concept, then it not only simplifies it, but it makes it memorable. And the second thing, other than stories, is the structure itself. Is the structure itself lend it to being something that can be shared and remembered. And so one of the ways that I tried to do that was just utilizing the parts of the ship and sailing in general and tying that to the concept. So for instance, a lot of what sales reps will do today is still utilize a shotgun approach. And it may be more targeted or focused than they started out with in their career, but it's still too much of a shotgun approach for the current market and landscape. And so the chapter on targeting is called the cannonball approach.
Right.
And it talks about how, you have to get close to your customer and know when you have one worth your time in the sights and go all in. And when you go all in, you have to be willing to accept there is a chance that you may lose and now be a little bit behind the 8 ball. But you have to go all in. So that's one. And then the anchor is a chapter on finding the why using Lean Six Sigma methodology to get close to the customer and understand what drives them and finding the why behind, their willingness to change. Once you get that, you can pull the anchor and typically get the sail moving.
Very nice. I have a question at this point. Do you think sales people should be actually spending time prospecting? Because finding the why does have an element of prospecting. But people who are very good at communicating and moving a sale forward may actually be extremely expensive resource which will be doing prospecting to understand the why. Chorus .ai, I don't know whether you're familiar with that. It's a coaching software, right, platform.
Hmm.
So they did a survey report on the state of the conversational sales industry, and one of the stats they pulled out was that a SDR has to make 106 calls before they land a meeting.
Hmm.
What I'm trying to ask of you is this, that finding the why is a very time consuming, deep diving activity.
That's the same problem I have with all the talk about the why in general. And it's the reason it doesn't come up in my book until it's the middle chapter. So you're exactly right. I mean, if you understand and uncover the why, I truly see the power in that. And I did the second I saw Simon Sinek do that famous TED talk. The problem is you have no idea. Most salespeople, myself in general, will make assumptions as to what is motivating and driving a customer without any idea. So you're exactly right. What I have found through the years of researching for this book and through my personal experience, the reason people are making 160 calls to land a meeting is because they're using a shotgun approach. And so is everyone else out there. So if you're not doing anything different, then you're also not going to. There's a difference between working hard and working strategically. And I think back in the day, even 5 years ago, you could work hard as a salesperson and get some things pulled through. But now you have to be much more strategic. So what if you took that 160 and I have just a little algorithm that I wrote to sort of quickly tease out prospects for my own pool of doctors. You take that 160 and you whittle it down to, let's say, 15. And these are 15 much more targeted prospects. And then instead of sending emails to try and get a meeting, maybe you whiteboard the person's name and do a quick little video where you introduce yourself, kind of humanize yourself, and you send them a video with a short little value proposition that starts off with their own name on a whiteboard. Now that's different. Now they get to sort of meet you, understand what you're about through that video. And it doesn't take a whole lot more time, but it's going to be seen more. It's going to be received more humanly and emotional. And I think that's where people are very sensitive right now, is we don't want to be sold. There is a human on the other side of every one of these interactions. And I've always felt like it's disingenuous to think that we can swindle or sway them with some sort of selling method. So, I think just to sort of answer your question, you're always going to need a funnel. But if you got 106, can you be true to yourself and say, look, if I send all 106 of these people this normal standard introductory cold call email that I normally do, I'm going to get one to get back with me, and it's probably not the best customer opportunity. Just being a little bit more strategic and doing more preparation. So that's entirely why the first half of the book is preparing for the voyage, because it talks all about, how to boil down your own selling brand to 3 words. It's getting everything hyper focused and lasered in prior to actually selling.
It's time for a short break. Tyler was speaking of how making strategic efforts will likely change the prospecting game. When we come back, we will hear why Tyler thinks it is absolutely critical to plan first before you get into selling. That's exactly how he structured the book. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end. Welcome back. As we went into the break, Tyler started explaining the rationale behind spending time on strategic preparation. Let's hear why.
So, your book is divided into two parts. The first part is preparing for the sale,
Yep.
and the second part is executing on that plan.
Yes.
So, tell us a bit about how you see execution should happen and how, again, execution is changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everything sort of needs to be flipped 180 degrees. So we need to prepare differently. In the first half of the book, preparing for voyage, not only are you trying to hone in on a customer base that is much more targeted, and there's a good bit of resources in helping to do that that are also on the website. But you're also doing a lot of the discovery. Once you've whittled down, let's say we'll use that same 106 prospects. You got those 106 prospects, and you've sort of formalized your own little process to whittle it down to, let's say, 15. And then instead of doing your standard email, you do an introductory video, email, and quick elevator pitch. Okay, so you've done that, and you've got that first meeting. When it comes to execution, what I have found, the thing that is unbelievably powerful, no matter what type of B2B selling you're in, is what I call an observation. And it comes out of Lean Six Sigma methodology. But in essence, what you do is you are trying to get an opportunity to observe your customer's business prior to that first call. And if you pitch this correctly, you get not only one meeting, but you also get your second meeting. So I call this sort of a Trojan horse, but it's not disingenuous like that story. So what you do is you say, give me an example of a business.
Right. Yeah. So you can give example in the medical selling itself.
Sure. Yeah.
An expert.
And this will work outside of medical sales too, but I'll stick with that. So, because I think people would say, well, how can you observe, a doctor's office or an OR? Mm-hmm. You can, and I've done it in both. So what you would say is, let's say you've got a doctor that you're wanting to sell to. You would say, look, and for this example, let's say it's a device, a surgical device.
Right.
So you would say, Dr. Jackson, I wanted to stop by today because we have a new product that I could see you responding well to the technology and being somebody who would give this a try. However, I'm not really sure how you're currently doing this type of procedure. I'd like to understand better before I, even pitch it to you. And so all you're trying to do is get them to allow you to observe and understand their business. Or to use another example, let's say it's an office-based thing. You go in, you're trying to sell some marketing or something from a business standpoint to a doctor's office. You would say, look, you're busy, swamped with all of your patients. I want to make sure that I'm bringing value not only to your patients, but you and your staff. In order for me to, steer this correctly and come with value, what I like to do is an observation of your workflow so that when I come in, I can tailor an exact value proposition to you. And what I always tell people is, even if you decide not to do business with me, my observations and notes will have suggestions on things outside of even my work and real world. Things from my MBA program, things from my Lean Sigma certification. These are going to be things that you can take back your staff and utilize, to improve efficiency or whatever. So then if you get access to be able to do an observation, and it's amazing how many people will let you do that if you share examples from a different customer. Like, look, here's the process maps, and here's the value proposition that I put together for a different customer. They'll be like, oh, that's great. They say yes. Now you get to go in and observe, meet everyone, understand, just like undercover boss, everything that's going on behind the scenes, and really formalize a much more poignant and specific value proposition. So that's just sort of an example of the depths to which you can go in preparing. And what you would get then is a second meeting, because they say, okay, we'll go over the report in my write-up in the second meeting. And now, you've gotten some really good time with all the people that do influence them, and you've learned their business, and you're bringing value from day one without even having sold any.
This is a great example, very relevant. To many, it might sound obvious, but how many people in your circle of friends who are selling do you think actually does this?
Very few. When people here prepare for a presentation or a call, I think they prepare 5 minutes prior to going in their car. Because that's all they ever had to do. There's two stories that come to mind. The first is from Elon Musk's autobiography. I read it. There's things that are, of course, interesting about Elon Musk, and there's things that are, of course, frustrating about him. But irregardless of my thoughts or anyone's thoughts on him, there is one story in that book about a salesman that sort of, highlights this fact. And what happened is this guy for a year was doing exactly what I'm talking about. He's learning Elon's business, everything that he would need to be able to bring value to. This was SpaceX at the time. He finally gets this meeting after a year with Elon. Elon flies him into New York, told him he has an hour to pitch. And he opened the pitch by asking, with some small talk and, saying that he wanted to understand a little bit more about Elon before he got into this. And Elon said, I don't need any more friends. And you should have come into this meeting prepared after a year of, us sending each other information. And he kicked him out. He didn't have a PowerPoint or anything prepared other than, what he had already talked to Elon about through the course of the year. And I think that's so true. I mean, even with our friends and family, if they have a commitment, but then they drop the ball, you get frustrated because we're pulled so many different directions with our family, and there's so many things that are important in life outside of just business. So there's just not a whole lot of time to, build a relationship and get to know people. That stuff happens more organically in my mind rather than superficially. So I think the more you do prior to the call, the better.
One personal peeve I have about the discourse that goes on about sales is that people say, build trust, as if trust is a pizza.
Right, exactly.
You can knead the dough and fish it out in like 30 minutes. It doesn't work that way. And you said it right. I mean, and the buyer is not trying to be your friend. He's not trying to, play golf with you. I mean, those days are gone where all of us grew up in the same town. My friend became a factory manager and I'm a sales guy. I went in and tried to sell him something. He trusted me anyway because we played soccer together or whatever. I mean, that's gone. We are selling to people we'll never meet again, unless there is something more of value we have to offer.
Well, and another to that point, another big thing is, they usually talk about, and as do I in my book, opening, the importance of your opening when you're talking to somebody. And I talk about using transparency, brutal honesty, and empathy. But I also caution on all three of them because all these words, empathy, vulnerability, the why, these are all big, transparent selling. These are all big buzzwords right now.
Right.
And there is power in all of them. It cannot be faked.
Yeah.
People are, and it's disingenuous to believe that they can be. So the only way you can come in with some trust, come in, truly with empathy, is to understand the customer's business.
Yeah.
You can't say, I know what you're going through. I know you're busy. Thanks for, all this stuff. It's just words going in the ear and out the other because there's no teeth behind it.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I really like the idea of the observation. And actually another thing that comes to my mind is what you are suggesting is that I'm not here to just make a sale. I'm happy to give first. I'm happy to give you what I see, which possibly is of value to you, and then figure out whether I really have something more to add to that or not. And if I can, then only I will bring my offering to you, otherwise not. I'm going to invest my time trying to understand. And if I don't have anything really of value to offer, I will not. Yet I will share with you what I observe. So I think that's a great thought, and it's interesting that you say that a lot of people do agree to allow you to observe. I do not know whether that is universally true for other industries. I would like to look out. Do you have any data in terms of have you seen how this idea of request for observation works out in industries other than medical? The medical industry?
I was first introduced to lean in my MBA program, and at the time I was selling for UPS ocean freight forwarding, and I started immediately doing it then. And so I was going into all different sorts of companies because it was anybody that would be doing imports or exports. So printer companies, industrial engineering companies, aerospace companies.
Okay.
They all allow for it if you do your homework. You would want to, just like anything, you'd want to start off with, something like maybe a friend's business or somebody who, say, hey, you've already got a relationship with the customer. Hey, I'm trying something different.
Right.
I want to, understand your business and start sort of mapping out the value.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get a couple case studies and professional looking examples, then that's what you would lead with. You'd say, here's an example from one of the other customers of the value proposition I put together. I use the acronym, and I came up with the acronym in the book when we're talking about this. Mm-hmm. When you're going through your observation, you're looking for value. So V is variability. Anytime there's variability in a process or an outcome or a product, there's an opportunity. Yeah. The A is for automation. So if they're doing a lot of redundant or manual things, can your product or your service, tie up any of those manual tasks? The L is for lower cost, and it talks about how, a lot of times you may not have the lowest cost product, which was the case at UPS. We had probably the most expensive freight forwarding services, but the fact that they would know down to an hour when their shipments were going to arrive and go through customs. That was worth more than the offset of a lower cost carrier. So where are the ways that you can lower cost without just lowering your price? And so it goes on like that. And the acronym basically helps you look along the way. But really, that's the key, is to get behind the doors and behind the curtains. If they won't let you do an observation, how can you talk to other people that they work with or other vendors that they have worked with? Do as much digging as possible.
Right.
So that you're coming in there different than any other salesperson before you.
Awesome. Any story of either your own or someone who has come back to you after reading your book? Any story that stands out that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm a little bit early in the game, so it was released about 6 weeks ago. But I have had two people that I've actually talked to on the phone that hadn't known them or had any connection to them prior to this. And so the one was a guy out of Detroit, and he was in device sales and then got in a terrible car accident and was told he'd never walk again. He just incredible story. And he was down for 2 years. And when he finally was able to walk again and beat the odds, he didn't have a job. And so he started working for a distributor, and that's 1099, meaning you're getting 100% commission. You don't have any salary, or you're not on the payroll. But he said, I'm nervous because I've been out of the game for 2 years, and I couldn't find any books that were, medical sales specific. And I found yours. And he's like, he said he's mapped out his entire plan around this. And, he feels like even after being out for 2 years, he's going to come out ahead of the game, because he can see and remember how things used to be and how things were shifting. And he's so confident that this will help him,
Oh, awesome.
be even ahead of where he was when he left.
Right.
So that obviously felt great to have that conversation and, have him feel that way.
Absolutely. I mean, that one story like that makes it all worthwhile. All the effort that you've put writing this book, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me how the listeners can reach out to you, connect with you, find your book.
Yeah, sure. Anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest, quickest way. But my email address is tyler@thepirateguides.com. tyler@thepirateguides.com. But shoot me an email, or anyone's free to link up with me on LinkedIn. And I love, having discussions with people and learning from everyone else out there, who's in the grind and in the trenches. So I always invite anyone to reach out.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Wonderful. I wish you all success with the book, and I really do hope that we talk again soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great, and there's so many different directions we can go. So, this was a good first discussion for us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Coming up in the next episode with Justin Roff-Marsh is a thought-provoking discussion on one of the most significant books on sales of our times, The Machine.
Salespeople really should be members of a coordinated team rather than autonomous agents. The core problem that we were grappling with that was preventing us from attaining the levels of productivity that we were looking for was this fact that salespeople were autonomous. They were marching to their own drumbeat. So all of the assumptions that underpin the design of the modern sales function make absolute sense in the context of the 1950s, but no sense at all in the modern context. No sense at all. And some people do see it, and some people are amassing huge fortunes as a result of seeing it, but they tend to exist outside of the sales ecosystem. So an example of somebody who clearly sees it is Jeff Bezos. I mean, he understands that when you're selling commodity products, simple transactions, the ideal customer interface is no interface at all. So his whole objective at Amazon is to make it as easy as possible for somebody to make a purchase, which means making his platform to some extent almost invisible. It's as close to a friction-free interface as you can possibly get.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next episodes with great conversations with Justin Roff-Marsh, Brant Pindivik, and Amos Schwartzfar. Stay tuned. Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.